Good Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Today is Sunday, the 9th of March, 2025. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. Did you set your clocks back ahead? No, yeah, ahead. I think it was ahead last night. Why don't they get rid of that stupid stuff? I woke up this morning and I was like, oh my gosh, I woke up late. What the heck happened? I didn't remember it was when they set the clocks back. Anyway, some actual strange stuff happening in the world right now. This is, I find weird, is wildfires in Long Island. Never heard of that before. I guess they're threatening a billionaire's estate on Long Island, these fires. This is firefighters have been battling 4 wildfires in the outskirts of the Hamptons since Saturday, sending residents into a state of panic and prompting Governor Kathy to declare a state of emergency. Now, what about Canada and this trade thing and this whole trade tariff thing? What's going on with that? Well, Canada is it's serious. Donald Trump actually wants Canada. Canada's got a lot of natural resources and stuff. Let's talk LNG. LNG. What is LNG? Liquefied natural gas. Yeah, and Canada's got some big projects going on with liquefied natural gas. Where have I got it here? Uh, Canada's liquefied natural gas projects. There's 7 liquefied natural gas projects in Canada right now that are in the works, and they're in various stages of development. They represent a possible. They've invested over 109 billion. That's tells you how big this is in potential energy capacity, and they can produce 50.3 million tons per annum of LNG to Europe. That's big. That could have a big impact on this whole thing with the trade tariffs and stuff. And it's possibly just one of the things, including other types of energy, including oil. Did you know that Canada has I'm going to say, the largest oil deposit on Earth that's left that's big, really big? Saudi Arabia, when they first went in, they had, I think, 250 billion worth of oil in the ground. Uh, I think those 250 billion barrels or something like that. Anyway, it was. I remember it was 250. I looked it up, 250. But they've been tapping into that for a long time. Now Canada is 190. Venezuela, I think something like 80 or something like that. They got a big oil reserve, but there's not that many really huge oil reserves. And let me tell you, the West Texas crude in the Permian Oil Basin is a big reserve. But the thing about that is there was a lot of near surface oil in the Texas reserve, and they tapped that in the early days, and then they went in and they've used what's called fracking to tap more. But now it's getting rather deep in the Permian Oil Basin. It costs a lot the deeper it gets, and so Canadian oil, even though it's tied in tar sands, it's hard to extract. It's still, and now it's becoming much more viable. So there's the Canadian oil, there's the Canadian LNG, which are big plums, and there's so many other rich Canadian resources. Yeah, Canadian has got a lot of territory in Canada. It's wide, vast, open spaces and stuff, but they do have a lot of natural resources, even that a lot of them have went untapped. So Canada's a very rich country that way, and I can understand why America would want Canada. I can tell why they want Canada. But there's another big reason why they want Canada. It's got to do with this right here, the Arctic, and the Arctic shipping routes that are coming up. Now, these routes were not really that viable before global warming. But now the sea ice is becoming much thinner up in those areas, and they can break these open with icebreakers now, and they can make this route a viable route. And it cuts off, oh man, it just cuts tons off of shipping. But then there's military aspect. You have to move troops fast. if there's World War III. And this trade route is incredibly important. So the reasons why America want Canada are huge. The huge reasons there. The Canadian people are becoming basically rallied around the flag now, and they don't want to be taken over. So if you're being your neighbor, how much business does the United States do with America? Biggest trading partner. Well, they do about $750 billion a year. So Canada, in ways to try to get out of this tariff war, they're looking to the EU. Uh, with its U.S. alliance under pressure, could Canada join the EU? Now, the EU is a Canadian trading partner as well, and trades roughly $150 billion a year. Okay, so we just said $750 billion a year with the U.S. and $150 billion a year with EU. How would this LNG tie in with the European Union? And could Canada join the European Union? Now, I'm going to say that in order to join the European Union, you have to be tied in with European Union values. Your country has to already be tied in, like politically, a match, so to speak. Canada is. And so this is a very viable option, and that's what Canada is looking at. Now, Canada's $150 billion a year trade with the EU compared to $750 billion a year with the United States. If the EU could, now this is my big question, could the EU pick up their amount of trade from $150 billion, especially if they start to trade in LNG, to make the difference up from you losing the United States' trade? Because if Canada doesn't find some way out or resolution to this, it's going to affect the economy extremely adversely. And like I say, the banking system in Canada could be at risk if Canada faces a very adverse threat of losing all their trade to the United States. So I mean, in all this thing that's going on, but right now between Canada and the United States, why is Trump put the tariffs on today and then they're off tomorrow? They're on today, they're off tomorrow. Well, the answer to that is very simple. Why he's doing that? Why he's pulling the tariffs off and putting them back on again, putting them off and on, off and on. The answer is very simple. The Canadian government right now, it's got everything to do with the Canadian government and the exchange of power within the Canadian government right now. It's kind of like up in the air a little bit for the next couple months as to leadership. And so what Trump is doing is he's enacting these things right now, but he's not really seating them in place until that's solved. The governance of Canada has been solved. Then you watch. He's going to effectively move forward with this. So Canada better start making their other plans like joining the EU, other things, if they want to put up a resistance against what's happening. Now, homelessness in Canada. I'm going to talk about homelessness for a minute. Homelessness in Canada. Canada's got roughly, here in the United States, down in the United States, they got homelessness too, a homelessness problem. And they're trying to clean up their homelessness problem. Trump says to Washington mayor he must clean up the homeless encampments. Well, homelessness is directly related to your economy. Worse your economy gets, the more homeless you're going to have. Canada's got 250,000 right now, roughly. Even if they're able to do deals with the EU and stuff, you're losing your most number one trading partner. Basically, that's what's happening. It's a slow crawl. It's at a slow crawl, but that's what's happening. Homelessness is going to increase in Canada in the next year. And I'm not expecting it to be a sudden increase, but like in the first 6 months, I'm only expecting it to go from maybe 250,000 to maybe 260,000, so barely noticeable. It's going to be in that second 6 months of this year ahead of us. That's when I'm expecting a huge increase, possibly 100,000 more homeless in Canada than there is now, you know? And it's going to create a tremendous problem. I mean, people that have jobs right now because of these trade wars, they're going to be out of work very soon. And this is coming. This is set in stone already, pretty much right now. But they could ease things a little bit if they can get a few other deals like LNG deals and stuff like that. That's going to mean work for Canadians, you know. Now, what we're looking at right now is the Canada-U.S. dollar exchange rate. Now, you remember the other day. Now, this is where the pressure is on Canada. This is where the pressure is. Because, see, stage one is the trade tariffs. They come in. Then Canadians will start losing their jobs and stuff. And what'll happen is they'll have to be supported by the government. Otherwise, they'd starve. I mean, face it, you know. So there's going to be a lot more people that are working, like I say, working right now and won't be working 6 months from now or a year from now. And so what's going to happen is they have to stimulus. They have to do stimulus. They're going to, we've heard Trudeau get up and say that he's going to support Canadian businesses. Well, what does that mean? It means money. Can't support Canadian business without money. If they're not making money, you got to support them. It means they're going to be sending them checks. What's that going to do to the Canadian dollar? Well, it's going to hurt it. It's already, this trade deal's already starting to hurt the Canadian dollar. We started at 70 just a few days ago. We started at 70. It's just like I said, you watch it, it's going to be 70, 69, 68. Now, if they can do deals out there, Canadians, they might slow it down a little bit. It's decline. But this is what happens if you lose your major trading partner and you have to stimulate your economy through fiscal stimulus. This is what happens. The dollar's going to go down, tip, 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 tip. Now, this is the value of Canada, what we're looking at here, basically, compared against the U.S. dollar. It means that your dollar is what your country's basically worth. All of it. You know? So you're seeing the net worth of what compared to the U.S. dollar going down. In other words, right now, Canada is worth 69.5 cents. And a few days ago when I first did my show, Canada was worth 70 cents. So it's going to be 68, 67, 66, 69, 60. This is a giant sucking sound. This is America using their power in a bullying way to hoover the money out of Canadians' pockets. And this is why I say that Canada is going to have a lot more homeless. If this were to continue, like, look, in 5 years, if the Canadians were to say, hey, you know, we're hanging strong, we're, for the next 5 years, and this continues, say, for 5 years, we could be looking at like 40 on the U.S. Canadian dollar index. And there could be like 1 million, 2 million homeless if this continued for 5 years. Like if you take away the impetus, then this wouldn't happen. But this is a slow thing. This is like cooking the frog, but it's cooking Canada. And yeah, I mean, they were mad. The Prime Minister was upset. He cried even. Doug Ford was all upset. Oh, we're going to shut the power off to them with relish and all this. They're mad because they know what I'm telling you right now is correct. And there's no easy way out of this. Canada is in the trap. The door's sprung shut. And it's being bullied into submission slowly through a financial system that's going to squeeze every single Canadian until they're dry. And I don't really know what the answer to get out of this trap. This is a financial trap. And I don't think most Canadians know that they're in this financial trap. And it won't make itself manifest till a ways down the road. Now, can they squeeze out of it? Well, I think a first good step towards squeezing out of this trap would be becoming possibly better trade deals with the European Union. Because if the European Union's already producing 150 billion, could that go up to 300 billion, 400 billion, 500 billion? And then they would be starting to take up the gap of the 750 billion a year that Canada does to trade with the United States. That could save Canada. But there's not a lot of things out there that can save Canada and get them out of the trap that they're in. Uh, so that's basically the situation in a nutshell. Maybe I talked about that for a long time, but I'm Canadian. I mean, I want to see. I don't want to see my country go down the drain. Financially speaking, half of the people in Canada to have scurvy. From not eating right, not getting any fresh fruit. That fresh fruit and vegetables all come up from the United States, and you know what? They're going to be gold soon. As these tariffs escalate, 25%. Some of these tariffs are talking 250% on milk, things like milk. But what is the produce? It could be just as high. So if all of our produce up here, or a good bulk of it, maybe a little Niagara produces a little bit of produce for Canada, but up around there, peaches and stuff like that. But that's a seasonal thing. That's like only for a very short period of time when they're ripe. All the other produce comes up from places and shipped through the United States. Almost all of it. You don't eat your produce, you know what happens to you? I mean, I'm not talking silly here. Scurvy. It's the reason why they used to call the British limeys. Was it the British? Yeah, I think so. Because they used to take limes on their ships. Limes would last a long time out at sea, and the limes will keep you from getting scurvy, and that's why they used to take them. But it only takes about 2 weeks if you're not getting any fresh food. If all you're able to afford to eat is stuff like potatoes. And this is where we're pushing toward in all these trade deals. Trade tariffs will... They're a tax on the people. You think, a government comes out and says, we're putting a 25% trade tariff. Canada's putting a 25% trade tariff. They're just going to tax the people 25% more. That's like 25% inflation all at once. Or they raise it to 50%, 100%. And they can raise these tariffs. Oh man, they can raise them overnight. Now, where are we here? We're on to the financials. Silver this week finished out at $32.50, and silver and gold have been red hot lately. They haven't seemed to cool down very much. Cryptocurrency's now cooled. We're seeing the Bitcoin at 83,235 right now. That's a substantial. Nothing moves like that. I mean, an awful lot of people were buying in like at 100. It was well over 100,000 just there, and a lot of people were buying in. Now they've lost a significant percentage of their money already in this stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I know ever since this stuff's inception, there's been a lot of hype around it. But what's its main utility? How many people do you see going to Walmart buying their groceries with Bitcoin? You don't. It's got no real... None of these are actually used as a currency. So why do they go up so high? Why is it so expensive? It's because of the malinvestment of all of the other currencies of the West. And the East, too. The East is involved in it, too. They're all Ponzi schemes. You know how they work? Is the central banks of each individual country can produce a currency. They just basically take paper or polymer and print on it. And then they say, hey, this is now worth something. It's only worth something because they say it's worth something. And that worth something has everything to do with quantity. So if a government goes out there and they print more money, or excess amounts of it, the value of it goes down. And this has actually been happening all around. Like the United States dollar, if you were to go back to 1914, right now it's worth only about 2 pennies of what it was worth back in 1914. So 2 cents back in 1914 buy you what a buck will now for 2 cents. And it's the same way with the Canadian dollar. Canadian dollar's even worse. If you were to go back like to the 1950s or something, the Canadian dollar had tremendous buying power. In fact, it was worth more than the American dollar. Should still be worth more than the American dollar. Instead of 70 cents, soon it's only going to be worth 50 cents. That ain't right. That shows right off the get-go is this mismanagement. Our dollar should be worth far more than the American dollar. Anyway, aside from that, all that mismanagement that's went on that's wrecked our dollar, they're all the same. They're all structured the same way, these fiat currencies. They don't have no value, any of them. They only say, okay, this has value, but that's tied in exactly to how many they print. And they're honest printing. There's nothing standing behind it, really. If the government come out tomorrow and said these dollars are worthless, they would be. Because they're just IOUs. Based on a loan that the government's debt's created. And what they do is, in this racket, is they do not create the interest payments on the debt that they borrow. In other words, the government goes out and borrows debt. Then they create the dollars. Whether it's here in Canada or in the United States, they create the dollars to cover that, borrow what they borrowed. But of course there's going to be interest on it. They only created the principal. They never created the money to pay the interest ever. And then the interest accrues over decades, very slowly, until it amounts to more than the principal was to begin with. Then what do? Then they got you caught in a trap. You can only borrow more dollars to cover the debt owed on the dollars that you've already borrowed, because they never created the money to pay the interest off. And so it just keeps growing. The debt just keeps growing larger and larger for whatever country you're in, until in the end, the debt becomes so overwhelmingly large it can't be serviced. Then the system folds up. Because it's a Ponzi scheme. The first time I got involved in a Ponzi scheme, I was just a little kid. I was maybe 14 years old or something. I can't remember. It was such a long time ago. It was down in Florida. It was earthworms. I didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme. And so this guy opened up this big earthworm business in the city we were near, and drove by it on the highway. And he says, we buy all earthworms. I think it was like $7.50 a pound. We buy all earthworms. Come in and get your contract. Sell your earthworms to us. Big signs and everything, So all looked legit. What he was doing was, earthworms multiply like every 2 weeks. They double. So if a person's growing earthworms, and you can just feed them the garbage that comes out of restaurants, whatever, they'll eat whatever, earthworms, but they multiply like every 2 weeks more. These earthworms supposedly used for fishing. Anyway, what happens is he was selling these contracts that I'll buy your earthworms, all that you can produce. You buy a contract off of me and I'll buy all you can produce. And I think it was like $1,000. He'd sell you a contract and he'd sell you a kit to grow them, and he'd give you the worms and show you how and everything. So the first people that bought those kits off him started to make damn good money. They were producing earthworms and bringing them back to him. But what he was doing was he was selling them right out the door again to new customers, because those people that had bought the earthworm kits and were making good money told all their friends, hey, this is a great business. I've already made my money back, and next week I'll double my money, and so on. And they were all excited, oh man, I'm making all kinds of money. And they legitimatized the crook. Well, isn't that the same thing that we're doing here with this fiat money Ponzi scheme? Is by giving these dollars, they're absolutely worthless value, we're legitimizing the crook. So what happened with the earthworm guy is, Once he got to the point where there was more earthworms coming in than he could move out the door on the other end, and there's all these contracts out there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contracts, and he'd make a big pile of money. He packed the money in and left town. And those people that have the contracts, they could just sing. That's how the Ponzi scheme works. That's how a Ponzi scheme works. So I got involved in that when I was a kid. I didn't buy one of his contracts. I didn't have the money. I went in as I bought a couple pounds of worms off of him as a kid, and I started to grow them with hopes that I could sell them back or sell them someplace like he's selling them someplace. I couldn't because the only place he was selling them was to his new customers. So I ended up as a kid, spending all my allowance money on a couple pounds of worms in some bin I made, and I was, but stung. I got stung a little bit because I was a kid, but only for a small amount of money. I helped legitimize him now by buying off of him, But I didn't know. I didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme. I didn't know what a Ponzi scheme was. Now here I am, an adult, and I see the whole world is being run by an enormous Ponzi scheme. All these fiat currencies, doesn't matter what denomination, whether it's Japanese yen or Swiss franc, or some of these countries are better than others, though. They're not as Ponzi as some of the other countries are. And, of course, their currency retains value better. But, I mean, the Canadian dollar now is going to be under pressure because they're going to have to print to keep their citizens from becoming starved or whatever. And that's just because of what Trump has done with this tactic. Let's just a spade for a spade. He's trying to squeeze Canada until Canada becomes USA. That's what this is all about. He said that's what this is all about. And they thought he was joking when he first started. Now they're not laughing any longer because they realize that that's true. So taking a look at our markets this week, how did they do? Well, the Dow, she ended the week up 200, but she lost a lot. And people were thinking it was a correction, but I'm not going to say correction in the Dow until I see it go below 40,000. And it's still 40,000. Ended the week at 42,801. S&P 500 ended the week at 57.70. Crude oil at 67.05. And gold at 29.17. Now the bond market, we saw yields rising, all except for the 3-month. But the 10 years at 4.3 and the U.S. 30 years at 4.6. And the U.S. dollar index has had a little haircut over the week because she was riding at around 107. Now she's 103.9 over the course of the week. Thank you guys for watching my show. You guys have a great, and I'll probably do a show midweek at sometime. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, somewhere along in there. As new developments come in the world, things are happening all the time now at an increasingly faster pace. It's a quickening. Thank you guys, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.